Ben, we didn't get you involved earlier. I know you're very upset about this government shutdown, and anything to do with the wall, and you love the new Democratic majority that's come in. So what do you think will happen here, Ben?
I think the president will give in sometime probably this week.
Why?
I think that you're starting to see already signs that I think Mitch McConnell's already privately told him that he doesn't have the votes in the Senate any longer. And you're starting to see this weekend the tweets get more and more desperate. I think Nancy Pelosi's done an excellent job in her first negotiation, showing that she's not going to budge. It's not going to change at all this week. The Republican senators know that's not going to change. The only person who hasn't figured it out yet is the president. And I think he's starting to figure it out because he's getting desperate. It's not going to happen.
So what happens? He just caves?
He's going to cave.
But what? Just say, sorry, I can't win? Or is he going to say something else?
I mean, I'm sure that he'll attack the Democrats. But, the Democrats passed a $40 billion, with a B, $billion border security package 4 years ago, with support of a lot of Republicans in the Senate. And not a $5 billion wall, a $40 billion border security.
And that was a compromise on DACA.
That was a compromise that dealt with all of immigration. It was, and Republicans took that deal down. That was the best deal they were ever going to get for border security. That was more money than the Democrats ever were going to be willing to spend on border security. That would have been much more secure than this stupid wall. And the Republicans turned it down at the chance they had it, and they're not going to ever get a deal that's that good again.
So the reason why that went down the tubes was because the president is adamantly opposed to chain migration, and he didn't really think that was fixing the problem other than giving amnesty to the DACA recipients. So going forward now, the number one issue for the president is border security. We have a crisis there. And so basically the Democrats' position is what, Ben? Open borders, catch and release, let everybody in. 90% of the people that apply for asylum get rejected. Meantime, they get released into the interior of the country. So maybe it's a short-term victory for the Democrats, but what's the long-term plan? Just let anybody in?
The long-term plan for the Democrats is to enforce our current immigration laws, which have been working fine.
Oh, really?
They absolutely work fine.
Okay.
We're in an area here that is an economic engine because of immigration. So you come into Fairfax County, John, and this is the part of the state that subsidizes all the rest of Virginia, and it's because of the immigrant communities that have come in here and populate this area. We're now 30%.
Legal or illegal, Ben?
Both. But most of the people who are here, and I
so
I
you're
don't like the
you're
term
for
illegal.
open borders. You feel that if people can come in legally, fine, they can get a job.
I think that what our current immigration policy has encouraged people to come here illegally. So we can't now go around and say, I don't like the term illegal anyway, because we've encouraged them to come here.
That's true. That's true.
And let me talk about some people that have encouraged people to come here illegally.
Republicans.
Like Donald Trump, who employs a lot of illegal immigrants all over his properties.
So
for him to then argue that,
and Wall Street and Goldman Sachs and the gangster banksters and the low-wage crowd.
When Donald Trump encourages people to come here illegally and then, whines about, oh, well, people are overrunning our borders. No, they're not. They're coming here for jobs that are being created for them. They wouldn't be here if they didn't have jobs.
That's why the Mexican government offered 4,000 jobs in 1 year visas over the last 2 months, and only 195 applied because they want jobs. When they have jobs in Mexico, the migrants have jobs. Nobody applied. What they'd rather do is come to the United States.
There are better paying jobs here.
Yeah, sure. Come to the United States, and if
John,
things don't work out, they can get welfare.
It's a safety issue too. I mean, jobs in Tijuana is still a pretty dangerous city. People
so let's just open the country up to 7 million people.
What we need is comprehensive immigration reform. Let's all get on the same page with this thing. We need guest visas. We need workers to come in to do agricultural work. You cannot find people to do the kind of construction work that we need. And if you build the wall, John, you better make sure that the workers are on the Mexican side of it, because most of the people who will do that work, may not be citizens. You can't find people to do construction work. We need these workers.
Let's get to local government before Chap has to take off. Chap, Ben and I are very intrigued by your gambling legislation in Virginia that's coming up. I really wanted to bet the football games yesterday, and I didn't feel like driving
Right.
4 hours to Dover Downs or to wherever I got to go, West Virginia. And so it's very annoying when everybody else has it. And
You'd be able to drive to downtown Norfolk.
And I've said this, Ben, 100 times. You know, you go to Harrington, Dover Downs, Charlestown, MGM. Over half the cars in the parking lot have Virginia plates. I mean, this whole thing is asinine. How do we just open it up like everybody else, chap?
Well, I assume that's a segue to my sports gambling bill.
Yes.
Which, hopefully has a bill number at this point. I filed it last week. Basically, my bill would take existing sites which either have horse racing or OTB, and then any locality which by referendum chooses to allow sports gambling, you would then be permitted to have a licensed vendor who could open up a place, a gambling venue, which theoretically would serve, beverages, meals, what have you. People could come in and bet games just like they do in Vegas, just like they do in Charlestown, West Virginia.
Dover Downs.
Just like they're going to do in D.C. in a couple weeks. It would be just the same. And again, if, Fairfax City didn't want to do it, fine. I'm very confident some, Richmond, Virginia Beach would do it in a heartbeat. I feel pretty confident Richmond or Norfolk would go that way, just because I've talked from people down there. But it would be locality by locality. We're not going to try and shove it down anybody's throat. To me, I look at sports gambling, and I'm not a big gambler at all. But I look on it as a fairly benign activity. And the other thing, and this is kind of the part of my bill which didn't get a lot of attention, but in this day and age, we have a trouble getting people to actually socialize. Everyone's got their face in the phone. I was just looking at my phone a second ago so I could read what's going on in the newspapers. And my bill would not just create an internet platform where people could gamble from their basement, but would actually force people to go to venues.
See, I like that.
And socialize. It would make it a form of entertainment. So
no internet gambling. You'd actually have to go.
Well, you could get on if you got an app, but you'd have to be on site to use the app.
Right. So you could do it from you have to be on
but
site.
You have to be on site.
Engaging with.
Right, you can't do it remotely.
Engaging with people, and then you get the tax revenue from that.
Yeah,
now
exactly.
you say Ben Chap was saying that it's going to happen in D.C. How's that? How does that work?
They just passed the D.C. Council, and I don't think the Congress is going to stop them.
And they're putting in outlets at the arenas, so you're actually going to be able to bet from.
I think you'll be
Capital One Arena.
Yeah.
Bet on the
so you can go to the Caps game, and you can bet the Caps, or you can bet the Wizards. Mm-hmm. Is there still a Wizards, or did they just get rid of the whole team? I don't know what's going on.
I got to be honest. I used to love the Bullets. I love the Bullets.
I did a column on
this. I just tapped out when they went the other direction.
Now I think they're trying to trade the whole franchise for the Nets, aren't they? Trying to do that. That's what I heard the other day.
I can't.
5 for 5, just get rid of Beal and them all.
Can't tell you.
Interestingly enough, John, I've got my toe in the water here on some of the sports issues. Is that I'm sponsoring a bill to tier the license fees for people getting into fantasy sports.
That's a good idea, by the way.
And so that the license is so high that it's a barrier to entry. And so we're going to tier it down so people can start small, and as they get bigger, maybe the license renewal gets a little higher. But the idea here is that people really love the fantasy sports, and to be honest with you, I'm more in favor of that than I am actually betting on games, because eventually that can get ugly.
So is this going to be a new industry if this passes in Virginia, where people can apply? What do? You apply for a license and you just open up.
There's
open
a
up a
licensing
storefront
process, which we copied from other states, and you got to go through a criminal background check. You got to show some facility having done this before. You have to be bonded. And I got to go back and look at my bill, but I think we actually have the lottery board would be in charge of this process of it. And you got to be. It would be like any vendor that comes in and say you want to own a racetrack, and you got to come in and show what you got to go through the process. But once you get licensed, then you're available, and like I said, if the locality permits it, you can open up a business.
Well, let's go to Ben Tribbett on this. Ben, you were a professional gambler for a long time. You made a lot of money at it. What do you think of this whole thing?
I think it should be opened up to as many venues as want to host it. I think that, if a bar wants to allow people to place a wager at the bar, I don't have an issue with that. The licensing portion of it, I think, is important, because what happens in sports books is you tend to see where you tend to see problems come in is when large bets get placed on games that are meaningless games. Typically, people don't place large wagers on meaningless things unless they already know the outcome. And so to avoid that, you have to have a tracking system that allows these things to be tracked across different venues, and the licensing should allow that. Because you can't just go, if we opened up a sports book in this conference room today and said anyone could come place unlimited bets, we would do very well with the people that place regular bets. We would do very poorly with people that placed large wagers, with the exception of things like the Super Bowl. So, I'm all in favor of it.
You're saying there has to be a tie-in system,
I think the state has to have the lottery, and the lottery has to understand that its role in this is as not a revenue source, but as because the lottery's going to look at this as how do we make the most money off of it, but as a regulator of how do you ensure that this information gets across various platforms so that people that are betting in Norfolk or Fairfax or even coordinating with DC, that people aren't running back and forth between the different books, doing activity that the books can't track between themselves.
Well, OTB is not regulated that way. Like, for instance, if I'm betting the 5th race today at Aqueduct, right, and I bet $1,000 to win on number 5, right, that money is not going into the Aqueduct pool, so that's not reflected in the payout. So that's always been one of the concerns with OTBs, is that the whole thing is not tied in to one pool number. So I could bet
the odds.
I could bet somebody that's 7-1 in Aqueduct, and I could bet $2,000 to win. If I was there, it would probably drop the odds down to 6-1.
Right.
But if I'm in Chesapeake, Virginia, I'm going to get the same 7 to win. What you're suggesting is there has to be some kind of
some type of information sharing.
Right.
Sports books don't work without that.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, sometimes the people are basically, some of the big bets are when they're looking for sports books to make a huge mistake.
Right.
I remember when there was so much betting on the University of Maryland when they played UCLA that Maryland ended up, this was back in the 70s, ended up a 5-point favorite over a team that just won 43 games in a row. UCLA, when they had never lost by more than 2 points. I mean, you dumped all over it because the things are out of whack. But like you say, if you do it on the internet, that doesn't really move those odds like the bookmakers who were taking direct.
And not the way it does in Vegas, right? Ben and I have been there. I mean, if there's one sports book on the other side of town and they're not getting any money on Pittsburgh, but 3 others are getting all dumped on Pittsburgh, the line moves everywhere, right? Because they communicate with each other, because nobody wants to get caught in the middle.
I'm less worried about the line moving, because that's a issue with whether the sports book makes money or loses money, as whether the line is correct. The important thing is there a mechanism to make sure that people aren't using this as a way to make money on things they already know the outcome of.
Right.
And when you, I think Chapsville doesn't allow college. I actually would like to see college sports included, but as you get down to lower levels, and the reason I think college should be included is because it's already available on the internet. So people are going to do it anyway.
Right.
But as you get down to lower level events to bet on, that's where you're more vulnerable to somebody already knowing the outcome. I remember a few years ago when the Golden Nugget had a massive loss in its sportsbook. And it was because when they did the audit, second round tennis matches and minor tournaments, people were putting 100,000 bets down. They already knew the outcome of those games.
Right. So the bottom line is, look, Virginia's going to make money off it, right? Because they're going to skim the tax off it. So it's going to be up to the individual bookmakers. But in reality, has anybody in the gambling world ever met a bookmaker or bookmaking firm or bookmaking company that ever did make money ever? They all make money, right? Because bettors lose, right? That's why you go to Vegas. That's why Vegas is.
John,
they have bajillion-dollar
hotels.
The
way it works
most
is,
bettors lose.
Most sportsbooks don't care who wins. They just want to make sure they've got an equal amount of money on each side, so that they can keep the VIG, the 10%.
And that's not, but now, in fairness, that's not what happens, though. And this is where sports gambling is complicated now, because internet sports gambling works really well. Sports gambling in Nevada, with a couple of teams' exceptions, has always worked pretty well. As you're expanding it in other states, what happens is that the action is not even.
Right.
And so you can't get even action.
Because it's home team action.
Right. And so, like, for example, in this area, last year when the Capitals won the Stanley Cup, the Capitals were 10-1 nationwide. The sports books would have been killed on that, even though the odds weren't wrong. But the sports books here would have been killed on it because most of the action would have been on the Capitals in this area. So that's what happens. So
Yeah, but
when
think
you
of the 18 years before that, Ben.
Sure.
The sports book would have made a ton because the
Made a ton.
Caps would have
Well,
been the number
but
one
so-
seed.
but
Don't
so-
they have places they can lay that money off
exactly.
when the books get out of balance? You find a bigger bookie to
you go to the
to lay it off.
The
Yeah.
It's like
local
you get
Virginia
insurance.
bookies would go to the Vegas bookies and lay something off to protect
Well,
their.
sure. People have these things are all insured. Part of the bonding, right? But that's so you said they always make money. They don't always make money. Regional sports books don't always make money. Sometimes they can make a lot of money. Sometimes they can lose money when you're a regional sports book. So it's not a guaranteed.
they're more of a slave to the home team.
And that's where like things like a licensing fee come in that are really important because if they make this an onerous, large fee that only a couple of books can come into, that like say for example are just the national outlets that are just opening here, then they don't care because that's just additional action to them. They're all over the country, but it's going to shut out anyone being able to do it regionally. You're going to have to keep the fees small because
So you would rather see the fees small.
yeah, with it being open to a lot of places being able to open it because you're going to see big wins and big losses when you have local sports books
talk
instead
about,
of just consistent small wins.
I got 2 minutes. Let's talk or 3 minutes. Let's talk about the heartbreak bookmaker gambling event of the weekend, which is Dallas is 2.5 over Seattle, right? So Dallas has got a 10-point lead with a minute and a half to go, 4 minutes to go. So if you've got Dallas and you've laid 2.5 and you got a 10-point lead with I think it was 3:30 to go, you absolutely cannot lose that game if it doesn't go into overtime. And even if it does go into overtime, you still have a chance to win. You cannot lose that
No,
game.
they should have. Wait, did you bet on Dallas?
If you have Seattle, you cannot win this game.
That's not true.
Right?
That's not true because Seattle had already gone for 1 2-point conversion earlier.
I know, but in traditional,
everyone could see it. I could see that coming down the field. Everyone could see it
traditional
happening.
thing,
If they get a
right.
touchdown, they're going to go for 2.
so they get a touchdown,
and this is going to
and they
everyone
have
could
no
see that train wreck
kicker.
coming. Yep.
They have no place kicker. They go for 2 and get it. So if you got Dallas, you went from collecting your money to losing it on the fact that their kicker Janikowski got hurt and the punter can't even kick the ball off the tee or whatever, and so
to kick an
they
extra
go for
point,
2.
by the way.
He couldn't do it.
Harder
He
now,
couldn't do
35
it
yards.
because it made no sense for
That is true. It's a little bit longer.
it made no sense for Seattle to go for 2 because if they miss it, they got to get a touchdown to win instead of just tying it with a field goal off the onside kick. So it made no sense. So you lose because the kicker gets hurt. So that's one of the foibles. That's
They
gambling.
call it gambling.
Exactly.
That's gambling. And but also yesterday, every single underdog won over the past 2 days. If you took every underdog, you're 4-0. You win them all. You run the table, right? Texas, Indy was an underdog. Eagles was an underdog. San Diego was an underdog on the road.
San
and
Diego
so
was an underdog?
Yeah.
That was crazy.
That's
Yeah,
crazy.
they were an underdog. Yep. 21-year-old quarterback,
you
the
see
favorite
that
at home.
The Eagles were a touchdown underdog.
Yeah, Eagles. Yeah, like 7.5. Won the whole game. So if you bet the dogs yesterday, you run the table.
Who let the dogs out?
John Fredericks Radio Network. We're going to be back. We're going to have Super Bowl picks, Redskins. I like your gambling, Bill. You should put college in it though, because they're going to bet college anyway. But you got to start somewhere.